everybody. Welcome back to the 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast. It is so great to have my special guest, Roderick, on with me. I'll get to introducing him in a second. But welcome back to the show. Welcome to 2026. This episode will come out in February, so we'll be squarely in Black History Month. And I love Black History Month. I love Black people, so very excited to have this conversation. As you can see, I have a special guest, and we're in a new studio today. We are in Burbank, California, in the Valley of Los Angeles, and you'll see the link to the studio in the show notes. I'm going to start by introducing our guest. I'll read his bio, and then we'll get into the conversation. So, Roderick D. Hall is the section director for the Los Angeles section of the American Planning Association and has been working in the field of urban planning and community development for a whole decade. Roderick serves as one of 3 co-chairs for the 2026 APA California State Conference, which will be held in downtown Los Angeles October 3rd through the 6th. Roderick is also a board member for the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust and Innovative Housing Opportunities, organizations that focus on the development of parks and affordable housing, respectively. In addition to volunteering their time, Roderick is an affordable housing professional and works for the Los Angeles Housing Department, where they nerd out on affordable housing finance and asset management. Roderick, it is so great to have you on the show. It's been a minute since we met.
It's been such a minute. I don't even remember how we met. I feel like a lot of urban planners, through LinkedIn, then texting, and then some call, and then chatting, and now we're here.
It might actually be a full year, though. I think I reached out, or I went to an event that was being held Martin Luther King Day weekend.
You did.
That you were hosting in the Florence Firestone neighborhood.
Yes.
So it's been basically a year.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. It's all coming back to me. I think saying it was a year is saying the least for what we went through in LA.
Yeah.
Like, we were in the midst of the wildfires.
Literally, they were happening live.
So it's been a year, and definitely my heart goes out to all people impacted.
Yeah.
And then, we met that weekend, MLK Day of Service.
Yeah.
We were doing the screening of Biking While Black with Yolanda Davis Overstreet and
fantastic film.
The Florence Firestone Community Organization, and I can't believe we're here now.
Yeah.
And we've done so much more since then that I'm sure we'll talk about.
We will definitely
during
get
this
into
episode.
it. So I'll start with just some background on you. You're from the rural South, the country from North Carolina, and you also attended undergrad in North Carolina. And so I've heard you speak about that experience for you. Your family was not part of the Great Migration. They remained in the South while most of us, my family, left to go to Western and Northern cities. You speak pridefully about the land ownership and the home ownership that your family has and running outside barefoot and all of those experiences. So I want you to talk about your upbringing in a little bit more detail, because I think whenever I can give the microphone to country Black people, I like to do that all the time. And so if you could point to an aspect of your upbringing, if you could pick just one, because I'm sure all of them do, but one aspect of your upbringing that kind of sticks with you today and kind of shapes who you are even still.
Yeah, I would say for me it would be service. I think growing up in the rural South, service is core to the culture. You really can't do anything without people and supporting other people. I feel like I saw my mom, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, just anyone who was in the community really being of service, whether they were doing it through the church or whether they were just doing it through their own free will. And a part of that service was supporting with food. People garden, people hunt. It was childcare. It was people like just taking the time to nurture and I think develop the next generation. And it showed up in a lot of different ways. So for me, I look at my career now, I look at everything I've done in my time since leaving my hometown and going off to undergrad, going to grad school, and it's all been rooted in service. And that's actually how we met, because when I was in undergrad, I participated in the Days of Service, the MLK Day of Service, national. There were like a few different national Days of Services. Yeah. And as director-elect, I had wanted to do another sort of program for APA around a day of service, and chose to do it during the MLK weekend, to talk about the documentary Biking While Black. And so I think as I continue on and think about where I want to go next, I know that because of that upbringing, service will be key. And
Yeah.
however I can serve the community I live in, whether through volunteering my time, whether through my day job, working in the public sector, or just by having casual conversations with people, I hope to continue to be in service.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to be a planner and to not care about serving your community. I mean, if you're a planner, you don't care about serving your community, you're probably in the wrong, the
Yeah.
wrong industry. Sticking to that point of your rural upbringing, I feel like America's having its country moment right now. The cowboy boots, the cowboy hats. Beyonce went on her Cowboy Carter world tour, and even that sparked a lot of conversation about what is Southern culture, whose values and whose experiences in the South are championed and supported, and whose are kind of marginalized, and then what does it actually mean to have this American South in the context now that as a nation we're all over this land, through, for better or worse, as we moved westward, we took some of those values with us. So
Yeah.
for you, what does the South mean, and kind of what is important to you about growing up in the South in particular? And with this being a urban planning podcast, maybe speak to the value of land ownership and home ownership also.
Yeah, thank you. It is eye-opening to see how country is having a moment where it's becoming more mainstream in a way. And I especially think seeing Black people in that space is really great. I think growing up, it never dawned on me that Black people couldn't be country, because that was just what my upbringing was, and that's the only world I knew. And I'd see Black people riding horses. I'd see Black people hunting, fishing, gardening. A lot of things that I think we associate with being country. Even my voice has changed significantly from being a child and growing up there to now becoming a professional in Los Angeles, where my accent is not the same accent it used to be. And so I think when I think about it, to your point of Beyonce and Cowboy Carter, it's like been country. So
Yeah.
I don't feel the need to prove to anyone, right? Like whether I'm country or not. I know where I was raised. I know who raised me. And I think to your point around land ownership, a part of that just comes from being born and raised in a place where the autonomy of my people and our culture are solidified, because we do own the land. We do get to have a say-so in how things are shaped and formed and influenced. I remember growing up just having, I don't even know what the name of this parade was. I just remember that there was always a parade in my small town, at least for a few years when I was growing up, and everyone would be out celebrating. And it's things like that where I never really had to ask to be in a certain space. I never really had to ask for permission for something that was already given to me or my family or my community, because we own the land we live on, right? And not just in owning the land as in the autonomy an individual gets. I mean, people, if you're gardening on your land, you have the ability to give yourself food. Collards, mustards, sweet potatoes, muscadine grapes, just lots of things that inform the culture. Even being able to go outside and play with the earth, as opposed to
Going to a park.
A park. In the case of LA, there are some really great parks, but as I mentioned, I sit on the board of Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust, and the whole point of the organization is to create more parks and community gardens in areas that don't have it. And a part of where I got involved with that is because of my experience growing up in North Carolina, where I couldn't fathom not being able to, as a kid, go outside and just have access, to nature. My cousins and I would play in the woods, which is
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are like, what are the woods? But we'd play in the woods, and we'd get deep in the woods too. And it's so eye-opening because growing as a child, those woods felt expansive and big and exploratory. I think there was like a bus in the back of the woods somehow, and my older cousins had a little setup for the older cousins in the woods doing what older cousins do.
Yeah.
And I still remember when I finally got to go to that spot, I felt so cool because I was like, what are they doing? In the woods. But when you're so young, you tell, so you can't go with the older cousins.
It's a little thin line between being in grown folks' business and being in older cousins' business.
Yes, right. And you got to age along the way for each. So there were things like that. There's even just people going hunting, going fishing. And I lived at the end of a long dirt road. And so every house, people were biologically related. So I think even when I think about what it means to raise kids, I'm not a parent, but I just imagine how there must be a certain sigh of relief for parents knowing that when they leave, the entire community is related. And so you have support, you have eyes watching your kids, right? Like even being in LA, I often ask myself, like, oh, if I had kids here, who would I trust to watch them? Would I have people to help support in that way? So a lot of the land ownership isn't just about the owning of the land and having that as an asset. It's also about the culture that's created from having the land. And in particular, when you're in unincorporated county territory in the way that my family is, you get also more freedom because how government oversight and compliance works in those spaces is very different than what happens here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, to add some context to that, when you're in a city environment, right, you're now within multiple layers of government. You have the city as a jurisdiction, then you have the county having jurisdiction, then you have the state, and then you have the federal government.
Yeah.
So when you speak about being in unincorporated areas, that's a part of the county
Yeah.
that a city hasn't established themselves there. So your there's no mayor, there's the county commissioners.
Right.
And think about how often we engage with the county of LA just here in the city. It's drastically different in a rural environment.
Yeah. There's a lot more, I think also just the culture of interaction too, right? Because if you go to the county where I'm from, there's going to be a bit more informal interaction between you and the government staff. Chances are, depending on who it is, you may have grown up with them, right? And so there's a certain dynamic in rural communities where it's not culturally appropriate to other yourself, right? In a place like LA, you have to be a very neutral employee, right? And you can't really show what I would say is like the personable aspect because so much is happening here for real estate, for housing, for just anything policy related. And so through a lot of different reasons, there's a need in a place like LA to be a bit more restricted with self when you are engaging with the public. But in my context of growing up in the real South, it was a completely different dynamic. And even at the time, I didn't even know what a county commissioner was. I didn't even know really what form of government I lived in.
Yeah.
I just was out in the sticks, just living life.
Nobody was bothering
Yeah,
you.
nobody was bothering me. I wasn't bothering them. We really just had a very rare childhood, I would say, specifically for Black kids, right? Like if more Black people now are in urban environments and suburban environments, that's a completely different experience in childhood. And I've listened to a lot of my friends describe their experiences growing up in cities or suburbs. And I think about how in my childhood, I just got to have like unlimited access essentially to space. There was not, even in these areas where I'm at, I mean, we had county sheriffs, but they were not like constant. We really didn't interact too much with the county sheriffs. And when they did, it was people that like someone in our family knew.
Yeah.
So even the relationship to space, I would say, is different. At least it was when I was growing up. I can't speak to what it's like to be there now because I'm not growing up there now.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, I look back and at that time, and I look at where we're like where I'm at now in LA, and I really don't take it for granted, and I feel like I found a deeper appreciation for it because of how rare it is to be able to just be free as a Black person in space, in any space.
Yeah. No, it's a very relevant point because my family moved from rural parts of Georgia to Oakland and Jersey, and even in doing so, they kind of created little enclaves
Yeah.
of extra space. So they were still trying to preserve that independence that you have when you're living in the South. You're the section director for APA Los Angeles, American Planning Association Los Angeles. So talk to us, because a lot of the people listen to this show are not planners, and so the American Planning Association means very little to them. So
Yeah.
just a high level of what is the American Planning Association, how is it, briefly, really high level, separated in different organizations, and then what is it that APALA does for planning in Los Angeles?
Yeah, so for those of you who are not aware, the American Planning Association is the professional organization for planners. And you have APA nationals, you have divisions at the national level, you have state chapters, and then you have local sections. And so, to your point, for me at the local section is going to be different than what you may see at APA nationals. But what all of the threads have in common is they are a space for planners to grow professionally, to get support in understanding the challenges of the field and of the industry as they're happening, and also trying to be proactive, understanding the federal landscape or your state landscape or even your local landscape, and how policy and regulation is changing, how funding sources are changing, and really just allowing people to have a space to continue to serve our communities, is how I would describe it. And then here locally in the Los Angeles section, mostly we focus on programs, and then we have our annual awards. And so with the annual awards, we're able to have people submit plans that they've worked on, or we recognize individuals who have contributed in a meaningful way to the planning profession in Los Angeles County. And for those of you who are not aware, Los Angeles County has 88 cities as well as unincorporated parts of Los Angeles County. So, and I think that's over 10 million people together.
Yeah.
So when you're planning in just LA County, which is just a county, it really is almost like planning in a state, in terms of just the population, and the fact that different parts of LA County are different.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of what we try and do as a local section is just talk about the diversity of LA, not just in its people, but also in the topography and the places that make up LA County.
You're the first Black and non-binary section director. That is an amazing accomplishment. It's kind of crazy that in 2026 we're still experiencing first, but I'm grateful for you to be that first. I'm going to run through some of the things that you've done just in your involvement in American Planning Association since arriving in LA. You started here in 2021 when you were honored with the Emerging Planner of the Year Award. And then from there you became Equity Director and then Vice Director of Policy before you were elected to Section Director in 2025, with your tenure beginning in 2026. Can you talk to us about some of the work you specifically done at APALA and how it has shaped your career with that being a professional development organization?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I moved here in 2020, and then that following year I received, the Emerging Young Planner Award of Merit. And before that, I had been involved with APA in grad school, with APA Nationals on the Small Town and Rural Planning Division. And so I was familiar with the organization because I had already been in one of the divisions. And then I had not, because I had moved in 2020, February of 2020, I had not given much thought to getting involved in anything because I moved during quite an era
Yeah.
for all of us, and had a lot of things running through my mind, just moving to a new city, living alone, and being in lockdown. So I ended up getting involved, and there were a few things that stood out to me. First, with equity, I was very interested in trying to understand what does equity really mean? And in the context of APA Los Angeles, we were working on a strategic plan, and we had historically, this was our second strategic plan. As equity director, one of the things I was interested in was not necessarily having a part of the plan focus on equity, but instead having the plan in its entirety, with the goals and the aspirations, do things that would move us towards being a more equitable local organization. The thing about Los Angeles, though, is we are ethnically and racially diverse. So trying to recruit diverse people is not necessarily our problem. I think for us, when I think equity in LA, it's trying to make sure people who grew up here are also heard in the planning profession, right? Because oftentimes people are constantly displaced. And then also making sure that there's geographic diversity,
Yeah.
right? Because what's happening in Calabasas or Malibu is very different than what's happening in Pasadena. That's very different than Long Beach, which is very different than Torrance, which is very different than like San Gabriel or Temple City. And then, of course, we have the city of Los Angeles, which is the second largest city in the nation.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of different things happening here. And so
And the income diversity.
yes, and the income diversity. And so equity isn't necessarily just about what people physically look like. It's also just about how they have actually lived, and what those experiences have been, and how they contribute to the planning profession here in Los Angeles. And then from there, as the vice director of policy, I started to get very, very interested in, okay, we're talking about equity, but I'm also much more of a technocratic person. So I really want to read the details. I want to go into the ordinance, the code, the state statute, and I want to see how are we codifying operations for government and decision making, and what does that actually mean for different sections of a community. I think anyone who's worked in planning at this point knows that it's a game of trade-offs, constantly trying to move from one side to the other, trying to make everyone happy, usually failing to make no one happy. So with policy, I was able to serve on the legislative review team, which allows me to, when the state legislature is passing bills related to planning, there's a group of us who come together and review that and weigh in on comments, and we have a lobbyist who then takes that to the bill sponsor so that they can be made aware of, hey, you have a great idea, but this is what it may look like in practice, and here where we anticipate roadblocks, here are some tweaks to make. And then I also got into programming during that time. I was able to, as Vice Director of Policy, both serve on APA California's first panel about being queer in the field of planning, and then was also able to partner with the city of West Hollywood to do an event on what it means to be a queer city, recognizing that among the many things that Los Angeles County houses, I'm pretty sure the only city that's known to be for queer people, right?
Yeah.
Not just a neighborhood or a district or a block, but this city as a whole.
Yeah.
And so I was able to just lead conversations on that topic, and then from there got into thinking about different programming as well, related to the documentary we watched, Biking While Black, related to Black-owned businesses. Of course, we were able to partner with you for Black History Month and Women History Month and do a spotlight on the businesses that frequent Black on the Block.
Yeah.
We last year were able to do a walking tour in Little India. People don't know that there's a Little India in Los
LA
Angeles
has like
County.
a little of everything. There's
Yes.
a little Bangladesh, there's
Yes.
Chinatown, there's Koreatown, there's Japantown,
Yes.
there's little Ethiopia.
Yes, there's so many neighborhoods, and so we, got to do the walking tour in Little India, and there was food and dance, right? And then we also got to do a panel on planning for immigrant communities and what the different challenges are for immigrants right now, and how planners are some of the first people that communities are interacting with, and what it means to be a government official in that way. So we've done a lot of different programming, and it's been great to just start to understand what it means to shed light on what's happening here in Los Angeles.
How big is the team or the members at APA LA?
So I think we have about 15 people who make up our board.
Okay.
And then under that, there are committees. So, for instance, when it's award season, which take up the first 6 months of the year, you have people who are specifically focused on helping with the award ceremony. You have to have people who can help score, help review, get the plaques or trophies or whatever you want to call them. We have people who help with our programming. So it certainly ends up being an entire team effort.
Yeah.
Usually, probably when everything's said and done, definitely over 30 people in some way, shape, or form jumping in and helping.
Talk, and I know this is kind of off the topic, but for students, we do have a lot of students who watch the show who are either studying planning or studying landscape architecture or some field related to the built environment. How does APA, if they're not already involved at their college chapter, how does APA impact students in their growth?
So I would say it benefited me tremendously because I got involved in grad school. I think oftentimes when you are in school, it's very, very prescriptive. You are taking courses, you're learning, and that's very, I think, important for the development of a professional. At the same time, I think what helps develop a professional is having space to go out and start playing with those theories that you're learning and starting to apply that coursework in the real world in a way that the impact is minor if you make a mistake, right? And if you get involved with the American Planning Association, whether at the local, state, or national level or any of the divisions, you do get the opportunity to start practicing those skills, to start learning how to talk with people who live in different places, who come from different backgrounds, learning how to collaborate and start to analyze issues together, how to give feedback, how to receive feedback. There's a lot that goes into becoming a planner that's not just in the technical aspect of what we do, getting the financing, getting the grant funding, updating the plan, hiring the consultant, managing the project. All of that is great, and we need that. However, the beauty of the professional organization or the professional development organization is you also develop holistically as a professional.
Yeah, when we were doing our pre-show, you talked a lot about how you're moving through the different leadership roles in APA LA has really helped in your resume, frankly, of showing if I can lead section, I can also lead this project. I can lead this team. I can run this department, different things like that.
Yeah, whenever I talk to anyone, that's basically what you're saying is what I say to them, which is when you're at work, everything's already in motion. All of us are a cog in a machine, and there's nothing wrong with being a cog in a machine. Cogs help machines run smoothly, right? But that also means, again, trade-offs. You're not coming in having your own idea.
Yeah.
Your idea is important insofar as it aligns with how the cog is already turning. You're not going to take the cog off of this particular bolt and roll it over 3 bolts down, right? That's not what the workforce is for. However, with APA or any professional organization, you get more of that, right? You still have parameters because it's a professional development organization, but you get that ability to go, I've been itching to try, for instance, with me with policy, I was interested in putting together programs to talk about specific types of policy and to talk about the concept of certain types of cities, right? I don't have a day job where that's even remotely close to what I'm doing, but I still have a professional organization that allowed me to explore that interest, which keeps me happy and fulfilled. And at the same time, I'm learning skills, right? Skills that translate to my day job.
Yeah.
How to really get something done, how to take on initiative and then carry the project through to the finish line from start to finish. And oftentimes in the workforce, you advance like that, but it's not rapidly, right? And with the board, the current board that I have, and everyone's phenomenal people are in different stages. Some people, they have director, because everyone's a director. I'm section director, but then someone's vice director of finance, vice director of policy, vice director of programs. So every title is director level, right? And so we have some people who have that level of responsibility in their day job. So the learning curve is not as steep. But then we have some people who, they're young professionals, and so they're not used to being a director yet.
Yeah.
They don't know what it means to be a director. And so really it's fun working with them because you get to, at least for me, I get to really see people start to learn what it means to be empowered,
Yeah.
to take initiative, and that you don't have to come to me, for every question. You can play around and figure out and make a mistake, and it's a safe space, because that's what a professional development organization is supposed to be.
Yeah, and even in that, if you're maybe a little junior in your career, but you're a director on in APA in any level, that's reflective of your capabilities in and of
Yes.
itself.
Yes.
So it's definitely a good organization to be a part of, even as you're growing early in your
Yeah,
career.
I would agree.
We talked a little bit about equity, particularly in your role as equity director, but 2026, there's a lot of things happening with equity, with inclusion, with diversity. It's definitely either being reevaluated and on the worst side being under attack. So I want to get your thoughts on equity within the space of planning in the built environment, and what can planners do to make sure that we're still keeping equity in the forefront of our work even as these things are changing around us.
Yeah, so
It's a doozy.
yes, it is. I was like, ooh, where do I even want to start with that question? I would say this. The reason I got involved as equity director is because I'm a different generation. And I think for our generation, we're not the first wave. We're not even the second wave, right? And so equity is changing. Being in particular, equity, I feel like differs by place. When you're in Los Angeles, I don't necessarily think, at least for APA as an organization, equity is about recruiting diverse people. Like the board is essentially 100% people of color. Like there's different types of people, but equity becomes about other things. And for me, where I get fascinated with topics around equity are really about structures and systems. I think sometimes people, when it comes to equity, we're looking to say the buzzword. The thing about planning is equity usually happens in the places people don't want to investigate. It happens in the allocation formulas and methodologies for funding, and application scoring, and even in the way that state statute is written. It's never, by the time you see something that goes, and we're doing this for these people, that's not the equity. That's really the end result.
Yeah.
It really is starting at the beginning of a plan, or of the creation of a city ordinance, or state legislation, or even federal legislation, right? And it's in the minute details. And I think in a lot of ways that will continue to happen, right? Just because you can't use explicit words anymore to create or allocate funds does not mean that there's still not the ability to serve
Yeah.
different aspects of a community. And I think what's beautiful, my undergrad was political. I was a double major in political science and philosophy. And I think the beauty of this era that we're in is, while there are aspects of it that are unique and new, there are aspects of it that
That are
are
very
not,
similar.
right? And so studying political science, I was able to look at what this nation used to be, and how people found ways to move it in the ways that were more equitable and just, recognizing that that's subjective and everyone has a different take on what that means. And so I think, yes, funding sources are disappearing, and yes, certain language is now no longer in use, but the work is still the work. And there are a lot of ways, depending on the city you live in and the state you live in and that you can still do that work regardless of how different decision makers at different levels of government may choose to respond to the times that we're in.
And it is a very interesting time period because some of the programs that might be disappearing, some of the funding sources that might be disappearing are going to have their challenges. But to your point about systems that are already existing, every year you still have to do your budget.
Right.
You're still doing a budget allocation at your city level. You're still going to have the low income housing tax credit program.
Yes.
You're still going to have certain programs that are just standard operating procedures. And how are you using those resources effectively? Because I've always felt like once you start creating these little side things, you're not really thinking about equity at the center anymore.
Correct.
You're thinking of it as a side project.
Yes.
Okay, well, only with this little bucket of money are we going to do equity things.
Right.
When really it's the structure of your organization, the structure of your policies, how you lay out your city from the beginning.
Right. And that's to the point you're making. That's why when we were doing our second strategic plan, I had, as equity director, I was more interested in like, how is this plan in totality working to help us achieve the goals we have? I'm not necessarily worried about like these side goals of do this or do that. I want the day-to-day operations to be such that we are doing the work, right? And that's how I felt like life was growing up in the rural South. It was not like, oh, we need to go and do this or do this for this person or these people. It was the day-to-day operations of the culture, the hospitality are set up that you don't even grow up realizing you're being equitable. It's just the norm. And so for me, that's always the desire for the world I want to live in is hospitality and care are so centered in day-to-day operations that it just is what it is. And to the point you made about budgets and things, I think people have to remember we've never had budgets or programs get to scale. And so the work, while it may have changed course, has always been ongoing. And I think that people have to put that at the forefront of their mind that the work is still ongoing regardless of who's in what office. You still got to get out there and work. And I think sometimes that's lost because it can be easy for us to sometimes want to see what we feel is a savior. And really, the planning profession and the community development profession work best when the totality of a place gets involved.
No, I appreciate you sharing your insights on that for sure because it's very relevant to where we are right now, sitting here today, even sitting here in Los Angeles with decisions being made, and this being the 1-year anniversary since we had the Pacific Palisades, a fire in Pacific Palisades, and a fire in Pasadena, Altadena, and seeing their responses to both of those things also. We're in LA. LA is one of the most expensive places, New York, LA, pick a coastal city, you have its problems. Thinking specifically about our housing and our housing affordability crisis in particular, what do you see as some of the biggest issues within our housing market, and where are you seeing kind of good opportunities or good aspects of how we're solving the problem, or at least working towards solving the problem?
Yeah, thank you. And for those who are listening who don't know, Jasmine asked me this question because my particular area of interest professionally is affordable housing policy and finance. So if you're wondering, like at some point, like how do we pivot to housing? It's because this is where I nerd out.
And you've been in housing on multiple sides, in housing advocacy, housing analysis, housing policy. So I have to get your take on it.
Yes, and then although I've never been a developer, I've sat now on the board of 2 affordable housing developers. So starting to see a lot of to your point, the different angles. I would say in Los Angeles, the biggest housing issue is that people want there to be a housing issue. Los Angeles is too big of a city for there to be a singular housing issue. If that were the case, I would be so amazed. It would probably be very easy to solve this crisis. The reality is housing, affordable housing challenges here run the gambit. You have issues with land use and zoning. And how city code is written or not written to allow for housing production. You have naturally occurring affordable housing. Typically in the city of LA, most of those units are probably going to be rent stabilized due to the rent stabilization ordinance. And they have their own challenges.
Yeah.
You have housing that's been financed by the government in some way, shape, or form, and those units are having their own issues with the current reality we're in
Yeah.
terms of
And
operating costs,
expirations.
and not only on the cost side, but to your point, covenants expiring and it not being mandatory that they're renewed. We have the fact that people are trying to use things like inclusionary zoning to leverage market rate production to get affordable housing units, if we can even get market rate units produced. So we have, and that's separate from like the issues that tenants are facing in the individual units or the property, separate from the property issues, right? And just having, so you have troubled assets, you have troubled people. It's a lot in LA.
Yeah, it is.
And so when people are like, what's the biggest issue? The biggest issue is that there are multiple big issues and the funding is not available or at scale to address them all. And even when you are trying to address these issues, you're trying to get net gain, right?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes you're having net loss. So even if you're producing 200 units, if you lose 300, you've really only produced 100 units, right?
Yeah.
And then those people who moved out, probably because of how the waiting list and things work, are not going to be at the top of the waiting list to move into units that are newly created. So there's a lot of different conundrums, I would say, for housing here. But I think what's great is that what I love about LA is that there is also a huge commitment at
Yeah.
the local level from all types of people who span the political ideology spectrum to trying to get funding made available, to trying, like, one thing I'll say that impresses me about LA is people tend to be into taxing themselves
Yeah.
to address the issues. I can think about how many times I've voted on some sort of funding source. So people are here very dedicated to solving the issue and trying to figure it out. The thing is, though, is, to your point, like there's New York City, but with LA, you had not only the city of LA, you still have 87 other
Yeah.
cities. And so it's a different way of trying to solve this because the city of LA, while big enough to maybe do things on its own, every city in LA County is not at that size to do that. And so there has to be some sort of city county dynamic too.
Yeah.
So a lot of different things to figure out in terms of addressing the affordable housing crisis here. But what is great is the commitment and willpower to solve it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always surprised at the number of measures. So I don't know if anyone's ever voted in California, but your ballot is not just like vote here, vote there.
Yeah.
It's like a
Yeah, a pamphlet.
a
Yeah.
pamphlet.
Yeah.
And it's like 20 or so questions, and
Yeah.
there always is one about, well, you'll say yes to the 5-cent increase in
Yeah.
sales tax so that it could support homelessness or support affordable housing. And for the most part, they seem to pass, at least in the city of
Yeah.
Los Angeles. I'm not sure about in other places in particular, but they seem to pass in the city of Los Angeles. And there's always, now that I've been a developer, now that I am a developer, the NOFAs, the Notice of Funding Availabilities.
Yes.
I can see the availability of funding for developers who want to build affordable housing in this state and in this city in particular, because I used to work in New Jersey in affordable housing. It is so much larger, the number of sources that are available.
Yeah.
And even still, it doesn't feel like it's enough, but they are doing a ton for
Yes.
even still.
Yes. And also shout out to you for the work that you do as a developer.
It's not an easy
It's
job.
not easy wrangling those sources and getting through pre-development and just the entire process. None of it is easy. And I think just to nerd out a little bit on housing,
Yeah.
I would say that that's the thing that people don't realize is there are so many different funding sources, and really shout out to everyone involved in the process, the people who want to do pre-dev and really want to take a look at the site and really, really want to think about the best way to structure the deal, who you're serving, the different levels of income that are going to be involved. All of that is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of people, not just developers, but developers work with so many people, city
Yeah.
staff, consultants, architects, right? So I just want to appreciate you and
Thank you.
the
Yeah,
work
I have
that
a
you're doing.
project with a capital stack with 12 different sources.
Whew.
State sources, county sources, city source. Who got money? We taking it. We take all of it. Cash check, Zelle, Venmo, however you want to get it. I want to talk to you about the state planning conference.
Mm-hmm.
So, later this year, we brought it up in your bio in October. The California State Planning Conference, the APA California State Planning Conference, will be in downtown Los Angeles.
Yes.
And you have the unique opportunity of being section director when the state planning conference comes to your section.
Yes.
So, talk to us about that opportunity, how you hope to shape the conference, and maybe give us some themes, some insights into what we can expect in that conference, because I can't wait to be there.
So I'm very excited. Because as you know, and as you were mentioning, and for those of you who don't know, the state conference rotates around the state. So there's no guarantee that when you become section director, the state conference is going to fall during your tenure. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the state conference was not supposed to be during my tenure, but the way COVID played out, it changed the trajectory. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty excited. Not only am I section director, I'm also one of the conference host committee co-chairs. Okay. There are 3 of us. So I'm one of the main people helping oversee the conference. And then there are people who, both staff and other volunteers who are making this conference come together. So I'm very deep in it. Mm-hmm. And I'm very excited. I think that the thing that stood out to me this year the most, which is why I chose the theme I chose, is crafting our narrative, planning as storytelling. Because right now, I want people to become much more conscious of the work that they're doing. Mm. We've already talked about where we're at right now as a nation, as a state, as a city in terms of LA, and all the other jurisdictions around California. And the reason I love planning is because in this theme, it's kind of a merger of my interests. I'm a bookworm. I read a lot growing up for fun. I don't get as much time right now to read how I used to read because I'm working.
Yeah, I read plans.
Yes, I'm working a lot. So I chose this theme because I had this realization that as a bookworm, I respect authors, and I respect how authors sit down and they write stories and they tell a story, they craft a narrative, and it really can become core to the development of people. And I know for myself that's true. And so I really started to just think about how, if you look at this year's logo, it's a book with the city of LA and themes, aspects of the LA built environment coming out of it. Because when you think about like being a planner, really what you're doing is understanding what people want to see in their community, and you make a plan for it. And in that's the authorship, right? But then there's this fun component where it's almost like you're going from reading something to making it, right? Sort of how I think we're in LA, film industry, the entertainment industry, I should say, is here. So you have people who are writing, but then you have people who are directing and producing and making what's written take up a 3D or 2D form, right? And that's the same as planners. We can go, oh, okay, they want 500 units at 60% AMI. Well, we have people who help build that narrative and take that narrative off the pages and actually make it into the built environment, right? And develop those units at that level of affordability. And it gives people the opportunity to go, okay, so not only did I have a narrative I wanted on my community, about my community, I've now been able to see my city and the people who partner with my city or my community take these words on this page and actualize it into something tangible that now I get to experience, right? And that's very beautiful because it really starts to inspire people, again, back to empowerment. I'm very big on empowerment. And so for me, with this year's conference theme, I chose that not just for all that I just shared, but also because I want planners or anyone attending the conference to realize that this is your place that you live, right? And in this place you live, there are different layers of government. However, your city documents, your plans, your housing element, your general plan, a specific plan, all of these are ways that you can start to think about the type of place you want to live in and what can or can't be done to make it happen. Because if it is a time of dread for a lot of people, the best way to manage that dread is to get out and feel like you're being productive in a way that's tangible.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is local in your specific community, whether it's on your block, whether it's bigger and it's the neighborhood you live in, the neighborhood, recognizing neighborhoods are always shifting. Whether it's the city as a whole, you want to be on planning commission, or you want to be on the affordable housing commission or the transportation commission. Choose something, right, and start to not only help write the narrative but craft the narrative as well, because if you don't own your narrative, someone else will.
Yeah, someone else will. That's very important. And that's why this show was created, to connect with people who weren't planners, right? We have all this knowledge. You and I have all this knowledge about how planning works, how cities work, the housing element, right? 60% AMI. What the heck are those words? But we're all impacted by those planning decisions. And to your point, being involved in something small or something big, whether you're participating just by adding comments to a plan, raising your hand in a meeting, going to the meeting. There's various levels of ways you can be involved in shaping the narrative of your city or your street or your block, how you put it like that.
And why I'm big on this is because it's important for people to start to learn what the current limitations are. Sometimes, as you know, we experience so much blowback from the public, thinking that we're doing something nefarious, right? And really, it's just the limitations, the current limitations of the economic context of which we live, or the social, political, or economic context in which we live.
Or the code that we talked about.
Yeah. Right. And so, people need to understand, like, here's how the regulation is written. If you want to change it, here's how. If you're trying to leverage market rate projects, here's what their return is, and this is what you can get before their return is not met, and the entire project goes away, right? Like, all of that knowledge can only be given to people who don't spend their day in and day out doing this by having active civic engagement, right? And everyone doesn't have the capacity or the privilege, so this is not saying everyone's going to be able to, but we need people who can and who can really, to your point, devote their time to essentially coming in as an outsider and bringing that perspective.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I'm looking forward to that conference for sure this year in downtown LA. As we move towards the end of our interview, I have a few more questions. I would love to know how you would like your tenure as section director of APLA to be defined.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say the advice I've gotten from everyone who's been a section director before is, you're not going to be able to do everything you want to do. And I'm like, heard. So for me, what I'm choosing to do with my tenure instead is actually lay a foundation for organizational change. That's what I want my tenure to be focused on. And I'm very privileged we're undergoing our third strategic plan as an organization now. And so I'm very excited for how we're going to go about crafting that plan, because I now have a good understanding of the APA Los Angeles section model, and the APA model for how we run our professional development organization. And so I want this plan to be developed in a way that meets that model, as opposed to creating a plan that is not cohesive with our model. And a little bit of backstory on that, you're also familiar with ULI, Urban Land Institute. They typically have paid staff as a professional organization. With the local sections in LA, we don't, right? So we are having to create a model that, or a strategic plan that works with our model, which is, since we have volunteers and there's always elections, how do we create an organization where if you're just jumping in, you know where to go, because maybe people aren't around to give you institutional knowledge because we don't have staff, right? And so to me, there's no right or wrong model. There's just understanding the model and trying to make sure you set up plans that work with that model. And so what I hope my tenure does is really start to lay the foundation for making some transformative changes in the organization, from our website to our logo to how we do programs, to how we discuss what Los Angeles is and the brand of the local organization.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I didn't realize, but yeah, ULI is definitely a good parallel example, and they have a huge, paid
Yeah.
staff team there that puts on their annual conferences also. But another organization, if your ULI leans more on like the real estate side of
Yes.
things, where APA leans more heavily in the planning side of
Yes.
things. The P is for planning, and I'm a member of both as a
Yes.
planner and a housing person.
Yes, I was gonna say, I definitely recommend people, regardless, to get involved with both. Plans only work when they pencil, and projects can only pencil when the plans support them
Yeah.
penciling, right? Like, it's, even though they're different organizations, the world functions with the both of them working cohesively. So I'm always a big proponent as well.
Of
Anyone
doing
in
both.
affordable housing
Yeah.
usually is like, I'm a planner, but I also understand real estate economics. So
You have to know both. Our final question, and I hate to end this
I know.
conversation. You've had a tremendous career, a decade in the industry, and so you have a wealth of knowledge to share with our audience. So whether they're emerging planners in the industry as you once were, or a student right now in undergrad or in graduate school, what advice could you give to them as they're thinking about the next step in their career, or thinking about even going into planning as a
Yeah.
profession?
This advice I'm also going to give to people who are more seasoned than me as
Yeah.
well. I would say always stay curious. Those of us who come into this field are not coming in by chance. It's not like we're just like lolly dee, lolly da, fell into planning. We're coming in, and we're usually coming in because of a deep personal experience we had that we connect to, that now we want to figure out how to address it professionally. I know that's my journey. I'm sure that's your journey. Most people I meet have that journey. The thing about that, though, is if you don't stay curious, you may miss opportunities that help you better learn what it was you set out to learn. For me, just to give it a personal touch, I grew up in a small town, as we've already discussed, and I remember 2 summers, not consecutive summers, of going to the Boys and Girls Brigade. It was in a city, Wilmington, North Carolina, which is maybe a 30-minute drive, but 30 minutes from the country to the city is different. In LA,
Yeah.
30 minutes is not, you're not going far, but 30 minutes in this context, you could go,
Yeah.
you can almost go 30 miles. So I remember both times going, my mom, we'd have to wake up so early because she would have to wake us up, drive us there, drop us off, and then get to work on time, right? And I think she was at work either by 7 or 8, early.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how early we had to get up so that she could get us there. And that experience is so pivotal to me in my childhood that when I learned about this field of housing and community development, I became obsessed with understanding how to finance physical structures, right, and infrastructure, so that I could understand what was or was not happening in my experience, that my mom had to go that far so that we could have not only the summer programming, but summer programming in a dedicated space, right? And so now I'm a person who's obsessed with understanding affordable housing and community development finance, right? Like understanding the different funding sources that make up a capital stack, and how are you working with developers to really bring in these physical buildings, or really just the infrastructure, right? Infrastructure being both the roads, highways, etc., but then also community development centers, affordable housing, small businesses, right? And sometimes in projects, as you know, that's all in one project,
Yeah.
and they're phased in. And just those 2 summers, right? Non-consecutive 2 summers going to the Boys and Girls Brigade, started this whole experience that now I'm this in this field. So I'm only able to have gotten to this point because I stayed curious and I engaged in opportunities that I never would have thought I would engage in. And it's given me the knowledge and the tools to now be able to talk confidently about what I once was curious about as a child, as a teenager, and now as I prepare to enter my 30s, I can be a 30-something who can speak about community development and about if I don't know how to do it, I know how to hire someone who can do it, right? Even just getting that language and that skill set. So stay curious and stay prepared to go down paths that may seem unfamiliar because sometimes those are the paths that lead us to our calling.
Absolutely. They usually are.
Yeah.
They usually are. Well, Rod, it has been fantastic to have you on
It's
the
been a
4 Degrees to
pleasure.
the Streets podcast. It has been a phenomenal conversation. I look forward to seeing everything that you do in your tenure as section director at APLA. I'll be seeing you around the city and around the county for sure.
Thank you so much for having me and best of luck with your podcast.
Thank you. Peace out, y'all.
Bye.